Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy, for inviting me. He's already told you something about me, that I'm certified as a sexuality educator, counselor, sex researcher. I'm Professor Emerita at Rutgers University, which means I'm retired. I have no salary or any benefits, but I'm still conducting research. We've talked about my 7 books and my over 120 awards, including the gold medal from the World Association for Sexual Health, which your association falls under. And in 2013, the University of Puebla in Mexico named a research center after me. I was on the executive committee of the World Association for Sexual Health for 12 years. I'm a former director of the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health and past president of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sexuality and past president of the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to summarize over 35 years of research from the adaptive significance of my work with naming the Grafenberg spot or G-spot to PET scans and functional MRIs of the brain during orgasm. My research program has been devoted to validating the report of pleasurable experiences from sensual and sexual stimulation in women. Before I can discuss my research findings, it's important for me to put these findings in the context of how I view sexuality and sexual expression. Nope. Okay. I view sexuality holistically, and that is, it has used to believe that sexuality had one purpose, and that was reproduction. But today we see it as an important aspect of our health. It enhances the quality of our life, fosters personal growth, and contributes to human fulfillment. When the term sexuality is viewed holistically, it refers to the totality of a being, not just to their genitals and their functions. It includes all the qualities that make us as a human being: biological, psychological, emotional, cultural, spiritual, social. These are who make us as who we are. And people have the capacity to express their sexuality in any of these areas. It doesn't just have to be through the genitals. And I often carry, and I don't know if you have this here, a candy cane with me. This is a candy, and the red in the candy cane is the peppermint. But if you've ever eaten a candy cane, where do you taste the peppermint? Just when you get to the red, or throughout the whole candy cane? Does anybody know? You taste it throughout. And that's how I view our sexuality. It goes throughout all of us. The biological aspect most people think that intercourse is the only way to achieve sexual satisfaction. But I'm sure most of you here have felt very satisfying holding someone's hand or being held. A person can express their sexuality in any of these ways. It doesn't just have to bring to the genitals. This brings me to another concept that I want to share with you about sexuality. I am personally pleasure-oriented, not goal-oriented. And I don't want to have people set up my research as a goal that they or their partners have to achieve. My objective in conducting research has been to validate women's sensual and sexual experiences, not to create new goals. Now, there are 2 common ways of looking at sexuality. One is goal-directed, which is analogous to climbing a flight of stairs, where you start with the touch, kissing, the next step is caressing, and then penis and vagina contact to the top step of the big O, orgasm. This is a goal that both partners have in mind, and that goal is orgasm. If the sexual experience doesn't lead to the achievement of that goal, then the couple or the person who is goal-oriented does not feel very good about what they have experienced. The alternative view is pleasure-directed, and this I conceptualize as a circle, where each expression on the perimeter of that circle is considered an end in itself. Whether the experience is kissing, touching, holding, each is an end in itself. And you can add where the question marks are your own form of pleasurable expression, what works for you. There's no need to have this form of pleasurable expression lead to a goal. If one person, think about this, if one person in a couple is goal-directed and the other person is pleasure-directed and they're not aware of it, this can lead to problems with communication. And typically the male is goal-directed and the female is pleasure-directed, although it could be vice versa. And think about the problems that could occur if people don't realize their goals or do not communicate their goals with their partner. As I discuss our research findings, I'd like you to think about how you can use some of these findings professionally, whether you're an educator, therapist, researcher, or however you are involved in sexual health. It was with the concept of pleasure-oriented sexual expression that John Perry and I listened to what women described as pleasurable to them, and listening to the reports of women who said they didn't fit into Masters and Johnson's linear model of sexual response. That is, they had sexual pleasure, orgasm, and in some cases an expulsion of fluid from vaginal stimulation, not clitoral stimulation, and this fluid came out the urethra. This led to our rediscovery of sexual sensitive area that's felt through the anterior wall of the vagina, which we call the Grafenberg or the G-spot. Before I can, I'm not going to review our research with rediscovering and naming the G-spot, but I do want to say that we hypothesize that this area is composed of many tissues, many nerves, and many organs. More recently, a group of researchers studied 20 women using ultrasound and reported a correlation between they reported a correlation between vaginal orgasm and the thickness of the clitoral urethral vaginal complex, which they reported is also known as the G-spot. So these areas are all involved in the tissues there. In our latest book, we stated that this highly complex region may include the anterior vaginal wall, the urethra, the Skene's glands, which in women are now called the female prostate gland, portions of the clitoris, perhaps other glands in the region, and the surrounding muscle and connective tissue. We stated that the effect of G-spot stimulation might primarily be the result of stimulation of just one structure, such as the female prostate gland, or it may be the result of stimulation of several sensitive structures that are close together. The phenomenon of female ejaculation refers to an expulsion of fluid from the urethra that is different from urine. Many women reported that they had surgery to correct this problem, and others reported that they stopped experiencing orgasm to prevent wetting the bed. The fluid was described as looking like watered-down fat-free milk, tasting sweet, and usually about 3 to 5 cc's in volume. A number of studies have been published in which the fluid expelled from the urethra was subjected to chemical analysis. In our first published studies, we found a statistically significant difference between urine and female ejaculation in terms of I'm not used to using this, in terms of prostatic acid phosphatase, urea and creatinine, and glucose. Others found a significant elevation in fructose. Dr. Cabello from Spain reported that he tested the hypothesis that all women experience female ejaculation, although because the amount is so small and most women are lying on their backs during sexual activity, it may not be expelled and some may have retrograde ejaculation. He found significant differences in prostatic-specific antigen between pre- and post-orgasmic urine specimens. As you know, PSA is a test in the blood for a screening for prostate cancer in men and measuring disease progress and remission. Cabello also found PSA in female ejaculate, and Dr. Milan Zaviacek from Slovakia reported on PSA being secreted by the female prostate gland. Zaviacek proposed that the paraurethral and the Skene's glands are the female prostate gland, and this is where the female ejaculation is coming from. As I said, the name of these glands has been officially changed to the female prostate gland. And we also believe this tissue is part of the area that we have identified as the Grafenberg or the G-spot. A study published in 2011 in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, conducted in Guadalajara, Mexico, by Alberto Rubio Casillas, and from the University, he was from the University of Guadalajara, and also by Dr. Emanuele Giannini from Italy, and they demonstrated that female ejaculation and squirting or gushing are two different phenomena. They state that the real female ejaculation is the release of a very scanty, thick, whitish fluid from the female prostate, while the squirting is an expulsion of diluted fluid from the urinary bladder, which contains the components of female ejaculation. They conducted biochemical studies of the two types of fluid, as well as urine from the same subject, and there were significant differences. Based on these findings, it is evident that some women expel fluid from the urethra that is different from urine during sexual activities and orgasm, and some women may expel a little urine. This phenomenon is reported by most women who experience it as extremely pleasurable. So I hope that women who enjoy this will not have surgery designed to eliminate it, or that they also will not have injections called the G-shot into the area of the G-spot. This is supposedly to enhance sensation of the area, but this injection procedure has not been tested in any double-blind placebo-controlled trials. No studies have been reported or published, and it is being offered all over the United States and in many countries internationally. So I wanted you to be aware that there's no studies conducted on this quote-unquote G-shot. What is the adaptive significance of this area? Is the G-spot just for pleasure, or does it have an adaptive significance? Dr. Komisarek, in earlier research, did an extensive series of studies in laboratory rats in which he demonstrated that vaginal mechanical stimulation produced a strong pain-blocking effect, stronger than 10 milligrams of morphine per kilogram of body weight. However, the most convincing evidence that vaginal cervical stimulation blocks pain requires a verbal report from women. Consequently, we performed a series of studies in women measuring pain thresholds during vaginal self-stimulation. We found that the elevation in pain detection threshold increased by a mean of 47% when pressure was self-applied to the anterior vaginal wall, the area of the Grafenberg spot. When stimulation was self-applied in a pleasurable way, the pain thresholds elevated over 100%. There were no increases in tactile or touch threshold. This demonstrates that the effect was analgesic, not anesthetic, and not a distracting effect. This analgesic effect was produced by pressure and pleasurable stimulation applied to the anterior vaginal wall, or the G-spot, and was published in the journal Pain. This part, the reason I did this is because I wanted to talk to you about this next study. We believe that childbirth would be much more painful without this natural pain blocking effect, which is activated when the pelvic and hypogastric nerves and the sensory vagus, and I'll get into those data in a few minutes, are stimulated as the cervix dilates and from pressure in the vagina produced by the emerging fetus. Further animal studies revealed that when newborn rats are injected with the chemical capsaicin, they do not get this natural analgesia when they're adults. So this led to a very interesting study that was based on my observations made of women during labor. That is, Spanish-speaking women in New Jersey, where I was teaching OB obstetrical nursing for many years, seemed to have a harder time during labor, which I thought was cultural until I learned of the studies with laboratory rats. I then hypothesized that women who have chronically ingested a diet high in hot chili peppers, the main ingredient of which is capsaicin, would have a diminished analgesic response to vaginal self-stimulation. We conducted this study at the University of Veracruz in Mexico, where we found women who fell into 3 different groups depending on their dietary consumption of hot chili peppers. These women were born, raised, and always lived in the same geographic area, so we controlled for that variable, and the results of this study supported my hypothesis. That is, women who have diets high in chili peppers, the group in white, did not have the elevation in pain thresholds that women in Mexico who did not eat chili peppers had. The group of women who did not eat the chili peppers had pain thresholds very similar to women in the United States. That is, they had the natural pain blocking effect. And why I want to tell you about that is that I believe that many women here in India eat the hot chili peppers, and anecdotal reports from countries such as here in India state that the women are told not to eat the hot spicy food 3 months before they deliver. Before I spoke about this study, I was speaking to OB/GYN doctors in Malaysia, and the OB doctors there confirmed that the women of Indian origin had a harder time during labor than the women from Malaysia or from China. Those are the 3 groups that live in Malaysia. And I believe that childbirth would be more painful without this natural pain-blocking effect of vaginal stimulation, which activated the pelvic, the hypogastric, and the sensory vagus nerves as they are stimulated as the cervix dilates and from pressure in the vagina. So I'm just encouraging you to tell other women, or tell women, that they shouldn't eat the hot spicy foods for about 3 months before they deliver, or childbirth would be more uncomfortable. As I said before, my research program has been devoted to validating the report of pleasurable experiences from sensual and sexual stimulation in women. Another type of orgasmic response we measured in my human physiology laboratory was orgasm from imagery alone. That is, no one, including the women, touched her body, but she experienced orgasm. And we found the physiological correlates of orgasm, that is, significant increases in blood pressure, heart rate, pupil diameter, and pain thresholds, the same during orgasm from genital self-stimulation and orgasm from imagery alone, no one touching the woman's body, including the woman herself. We continued our research program by validating the subjective reports of women with complete spinal cord injury, that they do indeed experience orgasm. These women have been told, based on the literature, that they could not experience orgasm, or if they did, it was a quote-unquote phantom orgasm. We have documented that women with complete spinal cord injury do indeed experience orgasm from self-stimulation of the anterior wall of the vagina, the cervix, and a hypersensitive area of their body above the level of their injury. In our subjects with complete spinal cord injury, significant responses were observed in the women with an injury above the level of the entry of known genital spinal nerves, that is, the pudendal, the pelvic, and the hypogastric nerves. To account for this unexpected and surprising finding, we postulated the existence of a sensory pathway that bypasses the spinal cord, carrying sensory input from the vagina and the cervix directly to the brain, which we postulated to be the sensory vagus nerve. To test whether the vagus nerve provides vaginal sensory pathway in women, we hypothesized that the brain regions to which the vagus nerve projects, the nucleus tractus solitarius, or the NTS, in the medulla oblongata, would be activated by cervical self-stimulation in women with complete spinal cord injury above the level of the entry into the spinal cord of the known genital nerves that enter the spinal cord. We tested this hypothesis that the vagus nerve can convey afferent activity from the cervix to the nucleus tractus solitarius by conducting PET scans of the brain coupled with MRI to provide neuroanatomical localization. Now, the vagus nerve does project to the NTS, and during cervical self-stimulation in women with complete spinal cord injury at T8, using positron emission tomography, PET scans of the brain, we found activation of the NTS. Now, the main problem with PET scans of the brain is that we can see the general region of the NTS is activated, but we cannot localize the region of activity restricted just to the NTS. We needed an imaging method that was had better resolving problem. So we then tested and demonstrated that functional MRI would have adequate sensitivity as well as resolving problem. In 5 of the women with complete spinal cord injury, in whom we recorded fMRIs during cervical self-stimulation, each showed responses in the same NTS region of the medulla. These findings show that the NTS, which is the sensory nucleus of the vagus nerve, responds to cervical self-stimulation even if the genital sensory pathways through the spinal cord are completely severed. The NTS is just one of the brain regions that are activated by cervical self-stimulation. Other brain regions that are activated in women with and without complete spinal cord injury are the cingulate cortex, the nucleus accumbens, let me put this up so you can see. Can you see that? That's hard to see. The amygdala, basal ganglia, insula, hippocampus, and the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus. There was a gradual buildup in activity in specific brain regions leading up to orgasm. The first 2-minute period of cervical self-stimulation, only the amygdala, basal ganglia, and the insula were activated. As orgasm started, the cingulate cortex and the nucleus accumbens were activated, and all 7 regions were activated at orgasm. We also conducted fMRIs of the brain in able-bodied women during orgasm, induced by imagery alone in the absence of genital physical stimulation, and also that was done in a counterbalance design, and the NTS as well as the same brain areas were identified that were activated, the same exact areas. One of my PhD students, who has just completed her doctorate, did her thesis on fMRIs of the brain during orgasm in women, and she had 2 conditions: orgasm from self-stimulation and another time orgasm from partner stimulation while they were in the MRI unit. In her study of 10 subjects, 5 women experienced orgasm from self-stimulation and 5 women experienced orgasm from partner stimulation in different orders. and this is where she's published this. She found the same areas of the brain activated during orgasm from self-stimulation as from partner stimulation. These areas were the nucleus accumbens, the insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, the orbitofrontal cortex, the paracentral lobule, the cerebellum, the hippocampus, the amygdala, hypothalamus, ventral trigeminal area, and dorsal raphe. I don't have time to go into any more of her research findings, but this slide tells you where you can go to get the findings published. A review of the studies that I have just given to you can be found in our book, The Science of Orgasm, and that's available in a number of languages now. And also, we wrote a book for the Orgasm Answer Guide for the general public. And I found it interesting that when we wrote the Science of Orgasm, our authors, and this has nothing to do, but we're Catholic, Jewish, and Christian. And I wanted a Muslim co-author for the Orgasm Answer Guide, not to look at religion, but to make sure that we are culturally sensitive to different cultures. And what we found was that orgasm in women is in the brain, it is felt in many body regions, and it can be stimulated from many body regions as well as from imagery alone. Orgasm is not just a reflex. It's a total body experience, and we need to continue to be open to documenting the various sensual and sexual experiences reported by women. People need to be encouraged to feel good about the variety of ways that they experience sensual and sexual pleasure without setting up specific goals, such as finding the G-spot or experiencing female ejaculation. Healthy sexuality begins with the acceptance of the self, in addition to an emphasis on the process rather than the goals of sexual interaction. We are continuing our research to look at fMRIs of the brain in men and in women, and we plan to study women before and after a hysterectomy and men before and after prostate surgery. We continue conducting research concerning the pleasurable responses of women to different forms of sensual and sexual experiences to validate women's subjective reports. Most of the research has been conducted in men and the findings extrapolated to women. Women are different from men, and as I said, my whole research program has been devoted to documenting and validating the experiences that women report as pleasurable. There's not one sensual or sexual response pattern in women, and women are capable of experiencing many sensual and sexual responses. And I want to say one other thing, that I never use the word reach or achieve orgasm, because that's a goal. I use the word experience orgasm, because that is not goal-oriented, that is pleasure-oriented. I could go on with something else, but I know my time is up, and I'm trying to be respectful of your... I don't know, I was going to read a poem. Do you want me to read a poem that has helped me? It's up to you.
No. Oration, no question answers.
It'll take just a couple minutes, okay? I guess you can tell that I've been rather busy as a researcher over the past 35 years, and what I'd like to talk about next then is just a little different. It's a poem that was sent to me via email, and it really made an impact on me. And I hope it will help you as a researcher or health professional to keep your work in perspective. And if so, then maybe, or perhaps I've offered you something more than a talk about research. The poem is called Life. Imagine life as a game in which you are juggling some 5 balls in the air. I'm going to move over here because I don't have the slide on. You name these balls. You name these balls work, friends, health, and spirit, and you're keeping them all in the air. You will soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. But the other four balls, family, health, friends, and spirit, are made of glass. If you drop one of these, they will be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. They will never be the same. You must understand that and strive for balance in your life. How? Don't undermine your worth by comparing yourself to others. It's because we are different that each of us is special. Don't set your goals by what other people deem important. Only you know what is best for you. Don't take for granted the things that are closest to your heart. Cling to them as you would your life, for without them, life is meaningless. And don't let your life slip through your fingers by living in the past or for the future. By living your life one day at a time, you live all the days of your life. And don't give up when you still have something to give. Nothing is really over until the moment you stop trying. And don't be afraid to admit that you are less than perfect. It's this fragile thread that binds us each together. Don't be afraid to encounter risks. It's by taking chances that we learn how to be brave. Don't shut love out of your life by saying it's impossible to find. The quickest way to receive love is to give. The fastest way to lose love is to hold it too tightly. And the best way to keep love is to give it wings. Don't run through life so fast that you forget not only where you've been, but also where you are going. And don't forget that a person's greatest emotional need is to feel appreciated. Don't be afraid to learn. Knowledge is weightless, a treasure you can always carry easily. And don't use words or time carelessly, because neither can be retrieved. Life is not a race, but a journey to be savored each step of the way. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. That's why we call it the present. Thank you.